the supernatural.
Download the Legacy Edition of Spirit Blade, a full past audio drama, for free at spiritblade.com.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Finally, I guess, bringing to a close what I've been calling Un-E3 2020, whether it's Summer Games Fest or games for, I don't know what the crap all those things are called, but it's all just a bunch of Un-E3 to me. It's been a weird summer with news spread out a whole lot more, and a lot more news than we normally get, just because everyone's taken their shot at kind of showing their wares in the public eye. And yeah, I think I would prefer E3 as it was before, just personally, but that's more from a content creator standpoint. I think as just a geek who's interested in interesting gaming news, you know, it's nice to have frequent announcements to tune into and check out. But it's been hard to know, like, okay, which ones are worth tuning into? I think even from a fan perspective, I felt like, do I need to bother tuning into this, or should I just wait for someone else to kind of aggregate the news and let me know what the really interesting stuff is? So anyway, but before I close things up with my top 5 games of Un-E3 2020, I want to just quickly breeze through some of the wishes that I granted, or that were granted for me, that I put out there before Un-E3 2020 season began. Really quickly, we got an announcement of Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning Remastered. Really looking forward to trying that out. I think next week is when it's coming out. We got an Obsidian RPG, and specifically another wish of mine was an open world fantasy RPG of any kind where you can play as a dedicated Magic user, and I think that's going to be the case with Avowed. We got a Watchdogs 3 or Watchdogs Legion 2020 release date. We got a Far Cry 6 tease, which really kind of surprised me, but I was glad to see that. The PC Gaming Show covered single-player games of interest to me as primarily a console gamer, and we got consumer demos, which I wasn't sure at all if that kind of thing was going to happen, but online consumer demos, at least with the Steam Game Festival over the summer. And then arguably my wish for a Kingdoms of Amalur 2 was granted, because there's going to be some kind of a big DLC expansion for the remaster of Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning that's going to be coming in 2021. That's almost kind of a short sequel. We'll see how that turns out, but I'm pretty happy with that. Now, before getting into my top 5, I'm going to give just 5 honorable mentions. In years past, I've done top 10, but I, for time constraints, decided to narrow it down to just 5 this year. So honorable mentions, just in alphabetical order, would include Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Hey, more Assassin's Creed. I'm not really itching for it because I'm not done with Odyssey yet, but I'm sure I'll enjoy getting to it at some point. A small indie game, Gestalt, Steam, and Cinder, looks like a Symphony-like Metroidvania with XP systems and loot and experience grinding that I'm really into. I tried the demo, which you can look on this channel and watch me playing the demo of that game, and I had some mixed feelings about it, but I'm interested to see what the final product is going to be like when it comes out. Metal Hellsinger is this crazy jamming together of music and first-person shooting, first-person spellcasting, where you are attacking enemies to the beat of the music, and your success has an effect on the music itself, and so that looks really interesting to me. The System Shock remake. I have no experience with that series, but I love the BioShock games that were heavily inspired by System Shock, and so I would love to give that remake a try. And then finally, Weird West, a top-down action RPG that's supposed to be kind of like an immersive sim coming from some of the same people who made Prey and Dishonored, so I'm interested in seeing how that turns out. But now, for the top 5 that I'm most interested in that we heard about at this summer's Un-E3 2020. Number 5. Boom! Mother trucker! Anno Mutationem. Or Anno Mutationem. I'm not sure what this thing is, but aesthetically it really is eye-catching because it uses a pixel art style, but it is a 3-dimensional game. It has a 3-dimensional world, so it blends pixel art and 3D to create its environment. It's a cyberpunk game coming to a PlayStation 4, and they tweeted out on their official Twitter account for the game, along with some screenshots, did you know Anno has a bunch of cool RPG elements, such as enhancing your character and gear, as well as crafting crafting / buying cool stuff. Now, the trailer doesn't show any indication of that, so I'm glad that they put this out on their Twitter account. The trailer looks really cool, 2D side-scrolling with 3D effects creating depth, for the environment. So to see screenshots of like inventory stuff and upgrading your character, I'm like, oh, cool. Is this going to be something of a Symphony of the Night inspired experience? And that may be the case, because in the official description that the developers gave for this game, which admittedly does have some language issues because it's being developed in China, and so if you read through the description, it's clear that it was not written by native English speakers. There's some issues there, so it's hard to kind of nail down details on this, but it does say the developers of Anno Mutationem hope to provide a refreshing combat experience and rich exploration in the world of Anno Mutationem. So if they're emphasizing combat and RPG elements for upgrading your character and gear and stuff, and aiming to provide a rich exploration experience, this looks like something that me and other fans of the Symphony of the Night style game might really enjoy. So I will look forward to getting more of that. What did it say? I think it said 2020 is when this thing is coming out. Let me double check. All right, I can't find the information I want to find right now. I think I saw somewhere 2020, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I will be keeping an eye out for Anno Mutationem. Number 4. Watchdogs Legion. This one's coming out October 29th, and I'm going to, I think, come back to mentioning that date in just a minute here. I think it's a very significant release date. So we saw the different character types that you can recruit and the different skills that they're going to have. I don't feel like in this presentation of the game we got as much gameplay and mechanics information as I really wanted. They had a short film that they showed beforehand, and they showed lots of thematic things about this guy's a construction worker, so he uses a nail gun. This guy's a rough and tumble bar fighter, so he does hand-to-hand combat. This lady can control drones and da-da-da. And so we saw those things in action. What I really want to understand is, more specifically, what the mission structures are like. In fact, this is drilling down a little bit, and maybe I'm expecting too much to want this kind of information at this point. But I wanted to know, are there still these sort of timed puzzle type elements to the missions, such as those that were in Watch Dogs 2? Ultimately, Watch Dogs 2 did not end up being a game that I wanted to see through to completion, because there would be these timed puzzle hacking type things that would be required, or there would be scenarios involving like security systems where you would have to stealth in very specific ways with very timed movements to avoid getting caught, or resetting the whole thing so that you had to start your infiltration process all over again. That kind of gameplay is really frustrating to me, and so I want a Watch Dogs experience that thematically has the hacking and stuff like that, but doesn't ultimately come down to timed puzzles with a bunch of dressing on top of them. And that's what Watch Dogs 2 became for me. I haven't seen any indication of puzzles, timed puzzle types activities in the preview materials of Watch Dogs Legion, so I'm hopeful, but got to put a big "we'll see" on that. Number 3. I started the Un-E3 season not really being all that interested in Baldur's Gate 3, because I just had mixed feelings and largely negative feelings at the time about Divinity Original Sin. But after all the news came out, I went back to Divinity Original Sin. I figured out the way that Peter Franson can enjoy that game, and really found an experience there that I enjoyed quite a bit. I haven't started Divinity Original Sin 2 yet, but now the name Larian means a lot more to me. Larian Studios, who's developing Baldur's Gate 3, and we don't have word of a release date, aside from the beta. But I'm much more interested in this project now. I still wish it was real-time with pause instead of turn-based, and I don't trust that Larian really knows how to make an easy mode that's going to have the more light tactical experience that I much prefer to have in this kind of game. So the jury is way out, but I liked what I saw of the previews for the most part. They did introduce a prose narrator, meaning that all the kind of story bits that are in the dialogue boxes that aren't spoken by characters but are just descriptions of the scene or whatever are spoken by a narrator. I'm not into that at all. That's okay. I usually turn off voice acting in games anyway. There's maybe going to be some interesting spiritual themes. They're dealing in the story with some kind of cult of absolute or cult of the absolute. I don't quite remember, but it looks like religion, as is often the case in Dungeons and Dragons, is going to play a significant part, maybe even more so in this story than in previous entries in the series. They're adding verticality so that you're going to be able to jump or climb. Much more levels are going to be much more about that kind of vertical traversal and combat than they have been with past Larian Studios games. And you can also toggle turn-based mode during exploration, and I'm definitely going to appreciate that because there are some things I would like to do in turn-based mode even when out of combat. As long as I'm stuck with the turn-based system, I'd like to be able to take advantage of it whenever I can, even outside of combat. So, and of course all the D&D stuff I'm a big fan of that kind of setting, even if it's just inspired by typical D&D aesthetics. I tend to be on board for that, and so I'm not definitely sold on this being something I'm going to enjoy, but I definitely have my eye on it.
Number 2.
Far Cry 6. And this was introduced by way of a cinematic trailer, actually kind of two. Well, a cinematic trailer that was more kind of conceptual and moody, and then a story sequence, not so much a trailer, but like a story sequence that's in the game. And this... I was wondering what they're going to do with the Far Cry series after New Dawn, if they're going to go forward in that timeline. As all the games, I believe, have been chronologically sharing the same universe and moving forward in the chronology throughout the series, except for Primal. But this is called Far Cry 6, and so that says to me, okay, it is moving the story forward, it is moving forward. It's not a spin-off, you know. But even if you just ignore Far Cry New Dawn, the ending of Far Cry 5 had to have changed the entire world forever. So is what we've seen in the trailer for Far Cry 6 compatible with the events at the end of Far Cry 5? Maybe. Maybe you could argue that, okay, New Dawn is a spin-off that's jumping forward in the future. But I don't know. It seemed pretty catastrophic at the end of 5. So what does that mean? Does this mean this is taking place in the same timeline? Are we going to see that, like the Southern Hick, I think his name is Herc, who has been a mainstay in many of the games? Is he going to be coming back? He's seemed like kind of a silly character to be a part of this game, Far Cry 6, that looks to have a lot of gravitas, looks to be very serious, looks to be very political. And also urban. All we saw of this game in the game world was in an urban environment, and I don't think we've had a single urban Far Cry game. The series has been defined by I was going to say adventuring, but like making your way through the world in wilderness environments, in untamed wilderness environments, with little pockets of civilization here and there. But all we've seen so far in both of the main segments that they showed of Far Cry 6 said to me urban. And so I think that's great. I think that's exactly what the franchise should do at this point, if it's not going to go further into the future into a straight up freaking sci-fi thing that takes place after Far Cry New Dawn. I think going to an urban city environment, really cool. And maybe part of that is just because I'm enjoying Homefront: The Revolution right now, which is essentially a very Far Cry feeling urban first-person shooter. But anyway, yeah, I've really enjoyed the Far Cry series. It definitely stumbles here and there in different ways in each of the games, but I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen when Far Cry 6 comes out. But will it come out on February 18th, 2021? We've definitely seen some delays from Ubisoft games in the last year or two, and I think it's very likely that we'll see another delay. My guess is they just wanted to put this out there and say, hey, this is coming, get excited. But between now and February is a long time, so a lot could certainly happen. But I'm willing to wait so that they can get it right. I love that they got the actor who played Gus so-and-so, whatever his name is, the the bad guy in Breaking Bad, who ran Los Pollos Hermanos, I think was the name of the restaurant, and then he also makes an appearance as a major character in Better Call Saul. And so seeing an actor with that kind of screen power, come and be in a game like this and be presumably the chief villain in the game, I'm very interested. And it also maybe says something about the tone they're going to try and set this time around. I can't think of them ever having this prominent of a screen actor play a villain in one of their games. This is possibly the most prominent screen actor they've had playing a villain, at least in the Far Cry series. And so I would love it if it took maybe a more serious tone. I think there's lots of cool possibilities, but there's still a lot more than I need to see. And as I've commented before, I just don't feel like Ubisoft is very trustworthy, despite the fact that I enjoy a lot of their games and enjoy them quite a lot. I feel like the way that they communicate, intentionally or not, ends up not being accurate to the truth. So, number one! Avowed is the next big Obsidian RPG, as they called it. And this is the big RPG that they told Microsoft when they were purchased by them that they wanted to make next. And it looks like, a very generic kind of a fantasy CG trailer at the beginning, but at the very end of the trailer, it shows at least a representation of the gameplay perspective, which is first person, featuring a sword with runes on it in one hand, and a hand covered in purple flame of some kind of magical energy in the left hand. And so it's really giving off strong Elder Scrolls vibes. And I think that makes a lot of sense. This is the kind of thing I've wanted to see for several E3s now, since Bethesda has been so slow to prioritize the next Elder Scrolls game. And I think that it's like such a big hole in the industry right now for the types of big RPGs that Bethesda makes. We didn't quite get a replacement for Fallout in The Outer Worlds, but we got, I think, kind of like the next rung down, the AA version of a Fallout game. And I think that now that Microsoft has purchased them, there's a good chance that they're going to pump Bethesda's types of money into their future projects that are big open world RPGs. It makes a ton of sense to me that a Western game developer in Xbox, in Microsoft, would be especially interested in getting Western RPG developers. It's coming out for Xbox Series X. It did not say Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Windows PC. No date given. This is a ways out, but we've heard from, I think, several people over at Xbox that there won't be any exclusives for the Series X. There might be exclusives to Xbox consoles, but again, who knows what's going on there until it actually, rolls out. But we are not getting any exclusives to Xbox Series X for, I think, 1 or 2 years. And so this game is probably quite a ways out still, but they were just excited to let us know that they are working on it. And even if it's 2-3 years out, we're going to get it before we get the next Elder Scrolls game, based on what Bethesda has told us the last couple of years. It's described, Avowed, is described as an expansive first-person RPG. That still does not commit them to a game that's as big and wide as an Elder Scrolls game. You could call The Outer Worlds an expansive first-person RPG, even though it's not quite a big open world RPG in the sense of a Bethesda game. But I'm holding out hope that, again, they're giving Obsidian the money to make an Elder Scrolls-sized fantasy RPG. I would love to be playing this in, let's say, 2.5 years from now, at the earliest, probably. So there you have it, some pretty cool looking stuff, but all of that, in my mind, I have to stamp a big "we'll see" on top of, because who knows how it's actually going to turn out. Stay tuned in the coming, I don't know, days, weeks, months, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm going to put together some kind of a Christian Geek buyer's guide or something that'll hopefully help you as you're considering what of the 2 new consoles you might buy if you're in the position where you're thinking you'll probably only get one of them. And once those prices are announced, I plan on putting together a video that will hopefully be helpful to you, not just in terms of weighing the pros and cons, but also looking at your financial situation and what God would have you do with your resources, how He would have you allocate those. And so I'm hoping that that will be of particular use to Christian geeks looking at the upcoming consoles. Now, I'm just going to finish off the Un-E3 season with some thoughts that I shared at the start of it all that are worthwhile for me to hear and consider again. I always, around this time of year, really try to keep my expectations in check. You know, games get canceled. Games end up not being released, or they end up being really disappointing despite how great they look and how confident I feel that they're going to be something I'll enjoy. You know, they very often will end up falling far short of that, you know, and I think that that E3 or Un-E3 can be enjoyed and celebrated as a representation of what developers are aiming for. Even if without buying into the hype, we can say, that's cool that they're aiming for that. And I think that's a more healthy way to enjoy this kind of season, this kind of experience. We don't want to set our hopes, though, for happiness or fulfillment on how these games actually turn out. That's going to set us up for anger. That's going to set us up for frustration. That's going to set us up for just a wrong prioritization of things that's unhealthy for us in life. So I think that some good verses that have been good for me each year to kind of come back to include 1 John chapter 2 verses 15 through 17. In the ESV that reads, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride in possessions, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever." Ecclesiastes 1, 8 through 11 says, "All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, 'See, this is new'? It has been already in ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after." So today's new hotness is just destined to be tomorrow's been there, done that, leaving us looking for the next fix. And I think that's important to remember. You know, the things we enjoy are all going to fade. But God, by contrast, does not change, and He's the ultimate source of all enjoyment. He created creativity in human beings, modeled after His own person and persons, maybe I should say more specifically and accurately. So we have Him to thank for every good thing. James 1:17 in the ESV says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." Contrasted with all the things that He gives, He Himself does not vary or fade. Psalm 16:11 in the ESV says, "You make known to me the path of life." The psalmist is talking to God now. "In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." So when we are in the presence of God in eternity, we will know enjoyment and pleasure and excitement and fulfillment that will not fade, that will not get old. So anyway, I think those are things to consider to help keep things in perspective instead of setting our hope and our hype, which sometimes we can really confuse the two, can't we, on things like video games. Even though we would never want to say, because we all recognize, okay, well, it's silly. No, I'm not putting my hope in things. Well, sometimes if we examine ourselves, we can find ourselves falling into that. And so I think that it's worthwhile to kind of just refresh our perspective a little bit. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. The Christian Geek Central podcast is the longest-running podcast for Christian geeks with over 600 weekly episodes and counting, featuring audio versions of much of the same content you'll find here, plus exclusive content including weekly news updates from the creators of Christian comics, novels, and video games, debriefing and commentary about what I've been playing, reading, and watching, and my expanded responses to your comments and questions via YouTube, email, or the Christian Geek Central forums. And now, with timestamps so you can jump straight to the segments you want to hear most. Get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services and enjoy one more way you can geek out and seek the truth.